71. Princess Alice Vick Draken. In the game, she was one of the most fearsome combatants in her batch. In fact, the few times she fought Alexia made it clear that they both were equals in terms of martial talent. Of course, Alexia never admitted it out loud. But that wasn't all. Alice was regarded as a better strategist than Talia, nearly matched Michael and Juliana in swordsmanship, and was widely acknowledged as the Academy's best overall duelist. Her reputation wasn't just built on strength or skill, but on her ability to adapt and overcome any opponent, no matter how unpredictable. It was said that Alice could dismantle her enemies with a blade, all the while breaking their wills with insidious schemes, a balance of martial dominance and tactical genius that left even her enemies in awe. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a force to be reckoned with. Then there was her twin brother, who followed her everywhere she went. He was her shadow, her sworn blade. Yes, it was not rare to see siblings swearing loyalty to one another and becoming their shadow in the royal families. The practice was most common in twins. Willem Vick Draken was everything his sister was, just a little less. He was forever destined to be in her glorious shadow, as ironic as that might sound. Yet, he was the most fiercely loyal individual in the entire game. When the Scarlet Assassin ambushed the two of them, Willem had a chance to flee. Alice even urged him to take it. But he didn't. Instead, he fought by his sister's side, and died in front of her eyes. It was a tragic event, part of a small arc called, The Killing of the Royal Twins. And that seemingly small arc unleashed big consequences throughout the story, snowballing into many events and eventually causing the total war of the 5 monarchs. Though to be fair, that war was inevitable. It was bound to happen sooner or later. But let's get back to the point. After all, those events were going to happen in the future, a future I was determined to change. Yes, I was going to prevent their deaths. I would stop their assassination before it could even begin, no matter how much I was tempted to just let them die. Why? Because I hated them. Why did I hate them? Because they were childhood friends of my sister, Talia. Enjoy new adventures from Empire. And much like her, they tormented me throughout my childhood whenever we visited the Central Safe Zone. A couple of years ago, when we were still young, a civil war was raging in one of the now conquered territories of the Draken family. My father played a significant role in that conflict. In fact, he was one who ultimately brought it to an end. As a result, he spent most of his time in the royal palace of the Central Monarch back in the day. Whenever we visited him, though it was mostly Talia who did the visiting since my father rarely wanted to see me, we would run into Willem and Alice, who were close to our age. They were also twins, just like Talia and me. So the elders thought it would be a good idea for us to get acquainted. It wasn't. These two, along with Talia, made my life miserable. Not with malicious intent. No, that would have been easier to understand, but in that thoughtless, casual cruelty only children seem capable of. Alice and Willem were perfect twins. Alice was sharp, strong, and always composed, while Willem was warm, charming, and quick with a laugh. They had each other's backs in everything. They had a seamless partnership that made them seem unstoppable. Talia, of course, fitted right in with them. And then there was me, the odd one out. I didn't just feel like an outsider, I was an outsider. Alice and Willem were royalty, heirs to one of the most powerful families in the world. Talia, being a Theosbane and one of the suitable heirs to our family, was practically nobility herself, and everyone adored her. Meanwhile, I was just me, the son of a duke who barely acknowledged my existence. I was a shadow trailing behind my sister's radiant light. But it wasn't just our difference in status that made it unbearable. It was the way they treated me, not out of hatred, but out of carelessness. They didn't see me as a person, not really. To them, I was just Talia's awkward, weaker twin, someone to tease, someone to laugh at, not with, but at. I remember one winter evening in particular, when the snow was thick on the palace grounds. We were supposed to be playing a game of tag, but it quickly turned into something else. Willem and Alice decided it would be more fun to play, capture the weakling. Talia agreed, of course. They chased me across the courtyard, laughing as I slipped and stumbled in the snow, calling out mocking encouragements as I desperately tried to get away. When they finally caught me, Willem pinned me down while Alice crouched beside me, snowball in hand. "See, Sammy," Alice said to me with a smirk, packing the snow tighter. "This is what happens when you don't keep up. Weaklings get punished." Then she shoved the snowball down my collar, and the icy chill burned against my skin. Talia laughed. Willem laughed. Alice laughed. And I I laughed too, pretending it didn't bother me. Pretending I didn't feel the lump in my throat or the sting in my chest. Because crying would have just made it worse. Afterward, when I snuck away to warm myself by the fire, Willem found me. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he grinned and handed me a steaming mug of cocoa. "Hey, don't take it so seriously," he said, as if that excused everything. "We were all just playing, you know." And the worst part, I believed him. I believed that maybe, just maybe, they didn't mean to hurt me. That maybe they'd grow out of it. That maybe one day, I'd stop being the weakling and finally stand on equal footing with them. But that day never came. The war ended. We stopped visiting the Central soon after that and fell out of touch. Well, I did. Talia still kept up with them for a few years before drifting apart like people in long distance usually do. Anyway, with all that history between us, it shouldn't be a surprise that I had no desire to see either of them. But since when has the universe ever cared about what I want? Standing before me was Alice. Just as stunning as she was described in the game, and smirking just as cruelly as she always did in my memories. "Come on, Sammy, you weren't thinking of leaving without greeting me first, were you?" I sighed internally, took a deep breath, and put on the most joyously friendly smile I could fake. "Allie, how are you?" I greeted with the kind of over-the-top enthusiasm reserved for meeting a long-lost best friend. Then I turned to Willem, pretending to notice him for the first time. "Oh, and look at you, Will. How are you, man? It's been forever. You've grown so tall." Willem kept smiling, clearly enjoying this little act. "Didn't you just try to ditch me a second ago?" "What, PFF'd?" I laughed awkwardly, waving my hand like his comment was ridiculous. "That doesn't sound like me." "Wow, I'm hurt," Alice cut in, her sharp tone laced with mock solemnity. I turned to see her placing a hand over her chest, feigning wounded pride. "You were really trying to sneak away without even saying hello. And let's not forget, you didn't even bother to meet us at the freshman party, either." "Don't be like that, Alice," Willem chimed in smoothly. "You saw how busy he was during the party, devouring that cake on the ground." Alice burst out laughing, and so did Willem. Their laughter sounded exactly the same as I remembered, light, teasing, friendly, and just as infuriating. 72. My smile faltered for a second. I tilted my head, studying the twins with an expression that was neither playful nor friendly, but analytical. "You know," I began, keeping my tone casual, "it's funny. I used to think you two were untouchable. Perfect, even, but standing here now, you don't seem all that special anymore." Alice's smirk wavered, just barely. "Excuse me." Willem's brows knitted and a flicker of confusion crossed his otherwise composed face. "Oh, don't get me wrong," I said, my smile returning, sharper now. "You're still impressive, I guess. But all that grandeur, that perfect twin act you two used to put on. It feels a little childish now." Alice's eyes hardened, gleaming like embers. "Careful, Sammy, it sounds like you're forgetting who you're talking to." "Not at all," I replied smoothly, crossing my arms. "I'm talking to the same two who used to shove snowballs down my shirt and call it a game. Only now it seems you've traded snow for fire." Willem stepped forward, his easygoing smile gone, replaced by a cool, princely air. "You've changed, Samael. You used to be, what's the word, meek. And you used to not be a slave." I pointed at his chest, more precisely toward his heart where the bloodworm should be. "Tell me, Will, how do you live knowing you're forever at the mercy of someone?" Suddenly, Willem's demeanor changed. It was only for a split second, but I could swear I saw his jaw tighten and fists clench like he was ready to throw a punch. But in the end, he managed to maintain his calm. Alice did not. She stepped forward and her mask of regal composure slipped just enough to show her annoyance. "You know, I heard the rumors about you," she said. "Being involved in petty crimes, ruining your noble reputation, getting arrested. You grew up to be quite a delinquent. What happened? What are you compensating for by putting on that unbothered tough guy act? Unresolved insecurities, daddy issues, inferiority complex, all of it." I chuckled. "Wow, Allie, for someone who acts so high and mighty, you sure seem to know a lot about someone as insignificant as me. After all, I'm just a weakling, right? Isn't that what you used to say?" Alice's expression tightened, the smirk vanishing from her lips completely. "Weakling," she repeated, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. "Oh, Sammy, I was wrong to call you that. Weaklings know their place. You're just a fool who doesn't know when to shut up." I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. My voice dropped to a whisper when I spoke again. I don't like that nickname. Call me that one more time, and I'll cut your tongue out. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over us. The clash of steel and explosion of abilities happening on the battlefield around us faded into the background, distant and unimportant. The air felt thick. The world seemed ready to snap. And snap it did. Alice's origin card manifested above her shoulder from a burst of light sparks. Its surface was etched with a glowing crimson rune. Willem acted next and also called upon his own origin card. But his sister moved first. Flames erupted along her arm, burning fiercely as she thrust her palm toward my throat. It all happened in an instant. Finally, I ducked to dodge the blow and grinned. There's your infamous temper. I was starting to think you wouldn't make a move. From my crouched position, I swung my leg in a low arc, aiming to sweep her off her feet. But Alice was faster. She jumped back and summoned a weapon into her grasp midair. She was holding a longsword by the time she landed. That was all the opening Willem needed. His arm locked around my neck from behind, hoisting me up effortlessly before tossing me backward like I weighed nothing. I hit the ground hard, the impact jarring but not disorienting. Rolling with the momentum, I sprang to my feet just in time to see Alice charging at me, her sword ablaze with incinerating flames. Willem flanked her as a massive battle axe materialized in his hands. 2 against 1, and I was bare-handed. Yeah, the odds were definitely not in my favor. Alice struck first, her sword slicing downward in a blazing arc meant to cleave me in two. I sidestepped, the heat from the blade singeing the air beside me. Willem followed up, swinging his axe in a wide, brutal sweep that aimed to cut me down at the waist. I jumped up, tucking my legs in and twisting my body midair. The axe passed harmlessly below, and I landed lightly on my feet with a smirk on my lips. How is this a fair fight? Oh, never mind. I remember, Drakens never play fair. I taunted, backing away as they advanced. Alice's glare burned hotter than her flames, and she lunged again, thrusting her sword forward. I twisted to the side, grabbing her wrist and shoving her off balance. But before I could capitalize, Willem closed the gap, his axe crashing down like a thunderbolt. Discover hidden tales at Empire. I barely managed to throw myself to the side, the ground splintering where the axe struck. Dirt and debris exploded into the air, obscuring my view. Through the haze, I saw Alice regain her footing, her sword glowing even brighter. She slashed through the air, sending a wave of immolating fire hurtling toward me. Reacting on instinct, I dove to the side. The fiery blast scorched the ground where I was standing just moments ago. Rolling to my feet, I threw my arms out dramatically. All right, I called out in a voice full of mock exasperation. I get it, you're both are mad, but could we tone it down with all the fire? I'd like to have my eyebrows intact after this test. In fact, can we continue this later? We have 7 minutes before the test ends. Neither of them answered. They were already closing in. The scary thing about them was that their attacks were not only relentless but also perfectly synchronized. Alice was already a better fighter than me. Actually, it wouldn't be wrong to put her on the same level as Michael at this point in the story. Willem was just as good as me if we were talking strictly about battle prowess and attack potency. Still, I was fairly confident that I could hold my own against either one of them individually. At least for some time. But the two of them together were a nightmare to deal with. 73. Neither Willem nor Alice could believe their eyes. Samael, this was the same boy who had once been so meek, so timid, such a spineless pushover. But now, he was someone entirely different. He was different in both mentality and appearance. And it was unmistakable, like the excessive piercings in his ears or the sharp look of superiority in his eyes. They'd heard the rumors, of course. They'd heard how the youngest of the Theospanes had grown into a delinquent over the years. But hearing about it was one thing. Seeing it with their own eyes was another. And then there was the crude way he spoke to them. To them, royals of the Central. This was the same boy who once couldn't even look Alice in the eyes without trembling, and now he had the gall to threaten to cut out her tongue. But the most shocking thing of all wasn't his words. It was the fact that he could back it all up with his strength. Somehow, Samael was managing to hold his ground, going toe-to-toe with both of them in a 2-on-1 unrestrained fight. Alice narrowed her eyes as she moved to flank him, her sword ablaze. She studied him carefully between strikes, her mind racing as she tried to figure out how this guy was holding his own against them. Samael's movements were unpolished. His fighting style was rough and ragged. It didn't carry any elegance or grace. Just brutal practicality. There was no wasted effort, no flashy displays of skill. Every dodge, every strike, every counter was executed with the raw pragmatism of someone who really wanted to hurt his opponent more than he wanted to win. It was clear he hadn't spent much time training in the halls of elite dojos or under the tutelage of master swordsmen. No, this was the style of someone who had learned to fight in the alleys and backstreets, where rules were non-existent and survival was the only measure of victory. His hits were messy, sometimes reckless, but they hurt nonetheless. Alice parried his sudden jab toward her throat, the impact reverberating up her arm. She gritted her teeth. He's strong, stronger than she remembered. It made sense, really. After all, if rumors were to be believed, then this young man subdued every awakened teen gang in the city of Luxara. He was said to rule the streets of the Golden City with an iron fist. He was indeed someone with a lot of real-life fight experience, maybe even more than both of the royal twins combined. Samael pivoted sharply, using the momentum from her deflected blow to twist toward Willem and deliver a sharp kick to his side. The force of the strike wasn't enough to hurt Willem, but it still made him stagger. Alice moved to strike again by raising her sword high to deliver a downward slash. However, Samael was already rushing in. He slammed his palm against the pommel of her sword, halting her slash before driving his knee to her ribs. "Ka!" Alice gasped sharply. It hurt, but she raised her free palm and invoked the flames. The flames answered, coalescing into a fireball that exploded squarely into Samael's chest at point zero with the force of a cannon blast. Since he was standing so close to Alice, the golden-haired boy didn't get a chance to jump back to safety, and the impact of the explosion sent him flying back. Samael twisted mid-flight, arching his body instinctively to brace for the impact. But Willem was already moving. With the precision of a seasoned fighter, Willem's roundhouse kick connected mid-air, slamming into Samael's side. The force of the blow sent him careening sideways, his body crashing into the ground with a loud thud that left a trail of dust and debris in its wake. Samael groaned as he rolled onto his back, the acrid scent of scorched fabric filling his nose. His jacket was charred in places, smoke curling from the edges, but it had done its job. The Academy-issued combat gear had absorbed the brunt of the flames, leaving his skin mostly intact. Still, the pain was real. His ribs ached, his breathing shallow, but the sharp grin that spread across his face was anything but defeated. "Nice one," he rasped, propping himself up on one elbow as he wiped a smear of dirt from his cheek. "I almost felt that." Alice gritted her teeth, but Willem was beside her to hold his sister back. "Careful," the prince said. "He's tougher than we thought." And that's when Alice suddenly realized what was happening. "Will," she gestured toward the golden-haired boy with her chin. "He's provoking us on purpose. He wants us to come at him and lose coordination. He's pulling us out of sync." Her breath hitched at the realization. It was so obvious now. Samael hadn't just been fighting, he'd been controlling the fight. From the very beginning, he'd split his approach between them. Against her, he used brute strength to break through her technique. Against Willem, he used his superior agility to slip through the strikes. He was also very unpredictable in his approach. It was calculated chaos, a strategy designed to break their teamwork. And it had been working. Alice bit her lip in frustration. She would have noticed such a transparent ploy if she hadn't let herself be blinded by rage. Samael was keeping himself in positions where he only ever had to face one of them at a time, using terrain, footwork, and his unpredictability to keep them at bay. The brilliance of his strategy wasn't in its complexity but in its sheer practicality. He wasn't fighting to win, he was fighting to keep fighting longer. Enjoy exclusive chapters from Empire. She exhaled deeply, the bitter truth settling in her chest. This was the difference in experience. From a young age, she and Willem had been trained by the best instructors in the Central. Their teachers had drilled them endlessly in martial discipline, the art of overwhelming aggression, and the golden rule of combat: strike first, strike fast. And it had always worked. Until now, Samael had turned their own principle against them. By choosing to stay defensive, he forced them to strike first, forced them to commit, and in doing so, he dictated the pace of the fight. It was infuriating, but even as Alice's frustration simmered, she knew the truth: none of it was enough to let Samael win. He was skilled, yes, resourceful and relentless, but skill alone couldn't make up for the difference in power between him and them. "Will," she called again, her voice firm and steady now. "Attack him together. Head on. Don't split up." Willem glanced at her, his brows furrowing in brief confusion. After all, by attacking him from a single direction, they were throwing away their number advantage. He wanted to argue with his sister, but the look in Alice's eyes left no room for doubt. Get close to him, she continued, her tone sharp as a blade. Force him to make the first move. If we stay on him, he won't have room to maneuver. Keep striking, don't give him space to breathe. Willem nodded once, his grip tightening on his axe. Got it. Alice shifted her stance, flames flickering to life along her sword once more. Across from them, Samael stood up to his feet casually, his arms loose at his sides, that damned smirk still plastered on his face. But Alice caught it, the faintest flicker in his expression, the tightening of his jaw. He'd realized they weren't going to play his game anymore. And so, this time, he attacked first. A lash of flame appeared in his hand, and he snapped it forward toward Willem. But the charming prince caught it with his bare hands, the fire not even burning his clothes. Really, man? Willem scowled, his tone laced with disappointment. You're using fire against a Draken. Samael sighed slightly. Yeah, I know, it's embarrassing, but the two strongest attacks in my soul arsenal are fire-based. Can't blame you. Fire is awesome, Willem remarked with a wry grin. Without warning, he twisted his body and unleashed his tyrannical strength to yank on the fiery whip. Samael stumbled forward, barely managing a grunt before he was flung clean off the ground. Willem swung him through the air like a ragdoll attached to a rope and slammed him into a cluster of fighting cadets nearby. The impact scattered them like bowling pins. Bodies toppled everywhere as groans and dust filled the dry air. Samael coughed through the seething ache across his ribs and right leg. He pushed himself onto his knees and took a painful breath. That was a stupid thing to do, he told himself. He shook his head to steady his dizzying vision, just in time to see a fireball streaking toward him at blistering speed. Samael's eyes widened for half a second before he grabbed the closest cadet, a short boy who still seemed dazed from the earlier collision, and pulled him forward as a shield. The fireball struck with a deafening boom, sending shockwaves through the ground. The cadet that was unceremoniously used a meat puppet slumped unconscious in Samael's grasp, his academy-issued combat jacket absorbing the worst of the impact. Samael tossed the boy aside, but not before taking his spear from his hand. Sorry, dude, you were in the wrong place, wrong time. 74. The momentum of the battle shifted soon after that. Samael was pushed back multiple times by the Draken twins. He started losing ground, and in under a minute, his situation went from bad to worse. Alice struck high, her fiery sword crashing down with impressive force. Samael raised his newly stolen spear to block, and the impact reverberated down his arms. But Willem was already moving, his axe cleaving low, aimed for Samael's legs. The Theosbane twisted to narrowly avoid the strike, but it left him exposed. And Alice was there to take advantage of that vulnerability. The pommel of her sword slammed into his stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Samael staggered back, gasping, but managed to somehow avoid her follow-up slash by getting away just in time. Not so smug now, are you? Alice sneered. Samael gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face. He thought about retreating, putting distance between himself and the twins, but Willem was already closing the gap. The prince's fist came flying toward his jaw with brutal speed. Samael instinctively raised his spear to block, but Willem's punch shattered the weapon's metal into splinters. With nothing to protect him, the blow connected with Samael in the face, sending him reeling. Blood trickled from his nose as he stumbled back, his vision blurring slightly. He barely regained his footing when he realized Alice had circled behind him. Before he could react, her boot slammed into the back of his knee, forcing him to drop down on one leg. Now kneeling on the ground, Samael barely managed to raise his hands in time to block Willem's follow-up kick. But the force of the strike still sent him sprawling to the ground, dirt and dust clouding the air around him. Where's that fire now, Sammy? Alice barked, her voice dripping with derision. Where's your sharp tongue? Samael tasted blood. He coughed a few times, and without warning, he sprang up to thrust his palm toward Alice's throat. But the princess was quick. She stepped back to get just out of his reach. Almost at the same time, her brother slammed his knee into Samael's gut like a sledgehammer. The golden-haired boy doubled over and spat blood on the ground. And before Samael could recover, Willem brought the polearm of his axe crashing down onto his back with a sickening thud. Samael hit the ground face first, his body sprawled in the dirt. But Willem still wasn't done. He planted his boot squarely on Samael's back, pinning him down like a predator asserting dominance over its prey. You're done, Willem growled, his voice low and devoid of his usual humor. Stay down. Alice came to crouch beside the fallen Theosbane. In her hand, a blazing ball of swirling fire took shape. With a satisfactory smirk on her lips, she looked him in the eye and said, "See, Sammy. This is what happens when you don't know your place. Didn't I tell you when we were little? Weaklings get punished." Samael lifted his head slightly off the dirt, but there wasn't a trace of fear on his bloodied face. If anything, he still looked a bit amused. Alice's smirk froze. She brought her fireball close to him until he could feel the scorching heat. "I don't like that look on your face. Let me burn it off." But before she could do anything, a burst of movement caught her attention from the corner of her eyes. Two figures were blurring toward them with impossible speed. Alice and Willem were forced to jump back as the two cadets landed between them and Samael. One of them was a short, petite girl with ginger hair that framed her doll-like face in soft waves. Her eyes were gray, like the sky on a rainy day, calm yet stormy, glassy like two pools of silver that seemed to reflect the world around her instead of gazing at it. The other was a tall boy with black curls that fell neatly down his neck. He had a handsome and athletic build. But it was also his eyes that stood out, dark as the abyss, deep and unfathomable. It felt like you'd lose your soul if you kept staring into them for too long. I could hardly believe what I was looking at. My body was wrecked. I was sore in places I didn't even know existed. I was exhausted both mentally and physically. Just when I thought I would lose, or worse, have my handsome face damaged, Alexia and Michael appeared, stepping in front of me to shield me from the Draken twins. I used to have a low opinion of them. I used to think they were stupid. But now, I couldn't help but change my mind. They weren't stupid. These people were. They were such idiots. I yelled. My voice was hoarse from the extremely dry air scraping at my throat. My chest felt like it was on fire. Every inch of my body was crying out in agony. But I still yelled, "You're all idiots." Michael glanced back down at me. He looked utterly confused by my sudden outburst. Of course, this idiot had no idea what I was talking about. I had to explain it to him like he was 5. Instead of coming to save me, you should have gone for the mountain. We need to find the cave, get the essence stone, and crush it to win the test. Why the hell would you come here? There are barely 5 minutes left. Why do you think I was fighting here alone? I could have run from this fight any time I wanted. But I knew the Draken twins would go for the mountain. No one here was strong enough to stop them. So I did. I stalled them for as long as I could to give Michael and the others a shot at getting to the cave. In the game, across every story route, Michael barely won the first team test. He always stumbled across the Draken twins and ended up fighting them for the Essence Stone. And while he managed to beat the twins every single time, it was always a close call. Too close for my liking. I didn't want to risk anything. So, instead of fleeing, I kept the twins' attention solely on me, hoping to buy Michael enough time so he could try to win. But this idiot came here to save me instead, like I was some kind of a damsel in distress, and he was my shiny knight. Who even asked for his help? Why do these cliché protagonists always have a hero complex? Alexia sighed, shrugging. I told him to leave you and focus on the objective. But Michael wouldn't listen. Michael shook his head, resolute as always. We won't leave anyone behind. We're a team, and we'll win this test as one. That's the whole point of these drills. And as much as I hate it, you're part of my squad. So I'm not leaving you. Even as he spoke to me, his gaze stayed locked on Alice and Willem, never letting them out of his sight. Now get up, Samael. We'll take these two down and win the, Samael. Where the fuck are you going? Oye, you bastard. Hey, get back here. Are you seriously running away? I'll kill you. Michael's voice shot up in disbelief. Because by the time he turned to look at me, I was already sprinting toward the mountain. The pain racking my body was unbearable, but I gritted my teeth and ignored it. Michael shouted again from behind me, his voice rising with each word. Samael, if you run, I swear to God I'll kill you. He could shout all he wanted, but I wasn't about to let him drag me into that pointless fight. My goal was to win the test right now. And there wasn't much time left. I took out a small pill from one of my jacket pockets. It was something I had asked Ivan to smuggle in for me yesterday. Swallowing the pill, I summoned my origin card. As soon as I reached the foot of the mountain, I knelt on the ground and shot Michael a quick glance over my shoulder. His face was livid. Sorry, Your Highness, I said, but you're no longer our squad leader. I've dethroned you by a unanimous vote. For a moment, there was absolute silence, broken only by the distant chaos of fighting in the thin clearing. After a few seconds, Michael's voice finally rang out, full of irritation. What unanimous vote? When do you guys even vote? Alexia huffed, crossing her arms. And why am I never part of it? By that time, the ground cracked in a perfect circle all around me. And in the very next moment, a platform erupted from beneath my feet at a violent speed akin to a springboard. The platform crumbled, but the sheer force of its eruption threw me into the air like an arrow aimed straight at the mountain's peak. 75. The speed at which I was propelled skyward was dizzying. The resistance from the air whooshing past me felt almost painful, constantly battering against my skin as if the very wind were trying to peel me apart. My heart pounded in my chest so hard it hurt. The sound of it drowned out the roar in my ears. I forced my body to stay rigid, fighting against the overwhelming force of acceleration. Adrenaline coursed through my veins and heightened my senses. I felt it all: the icy sting of the rushing wind, the metallic taste of blood on my tongue, the weightlessness of defying gravity. But above all, I felt terrified. In front of me, the mountain's jagged cliffs kept growing closer at an astonishing speed. And as I flew past an outcropping, I realized I was about to crash into a craggy stone wall just ahead. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I summoned my flame lash and twisted my body in midair, whipping the lash forward and slamming it into the stone wall ahead to kill my accelerating momentum. It didn't stop me completely. I still crashed into the rock shoulder first. Blinding pain tore through my body, but mercifully, I was slowed down enough to not get hurt as much as I could have. I slid down the slanting mountain wall, scraping against jagged rocks that ripped my clothes and scratched my skin. My breath hitched with every bump as I tried clawing at the mountain with one hand to find some kind of purchase. But I didn't. The descent felt endless as I kept rolling down while trying to control my fall. Finally, the incline evened out, and my fall slowed as I came to an ungraceful stop on a narrow ledge, sprawled on my back, gasping for air. My vision swam as I blinked up at the vast gray sky above. After a few long seconds, I rolled to my side with a groan and coughed violently. My shoulder throbbed, each beat of my heart sending waves of pain flaring through my chest. But I was alive. That was something. Never doing anything like this again. Yeah, that was stupid. It was a miracle I didn't break all the bones in my body. But I had no other choice. There wasn't enough time for me to climb the mountain the normal way, so I had to improvise. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to sit up. The flame lash had dissipated, leaving only a faint heat in my palm and the blackened trail it had scorched into the stone above me. I glanced down and saw most of the cadets still fighting in the thin clearing, while some of them had started to run toward the mountain. As much as I wanted to, I had no time to rest. I pushed myself to my feet and took out another pill from my pocket. It was an alchemical drug used to boost stamina and dull pain, highly expensive if bought legally and also very short in supply, so I was grateful I had Ivan to help me get it so easily. The pill was small, bitter, and immediately effective. As soon as I swallowed it, a comfortable warmth spread through my body, soothing the worst of the aches and numbing the searing pain in my shoulder. My breath steadied, and I felt myself calm down. I flexed my fingers to test the strength in my injured arm. It hurt, but I forced it to move. Then, turning back to the cliff face, I scanned for my next move. The ledge I was on was too narrow to walk any further. My only option was up, a nearly vertical climb that made my stomach churn from just looking at it. Fuck me, I groaned, but I knew I wouldn't get anywhere by complaining. So, I started doing what I could. I grabbed a broken shard of rock jutting out from the wall and began climbing the rocky hill. If I remembered correctly, the cave in which the essence stone was supposed to be was near the peak of the mountain. With no other choice, I kept climbing. It didn't take long for me to reach the cave's entrance. It was a large, jagged hole carved into the rock face, partially hidden by an overhang. I couldn't see inside clearly, it was too dark, but I was certain this was the place. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the cave. And the moment I entered, an orb of white light flared up, chasing away the shadows and illuminating the cavern's rough stone walls. The light was so bright I had to squint until my vision adjusted to the sudden glow. Opening my eyes again, I saw the bright orb hovering a few meters ahead, floating softly above the shoulder of a beautiful black-haired girl. Her golden eyes locked onto me as soon as I stepped into view, and a faint smirk tugged at her lips. "Hello, brother." Of course, I recognized her immediately. She was my sister, Talia Kaiser Theosbane. And she didn't look great. Her combat jacket was torn in places, marred with burn marks, and a thin cut on her forehead looked like it had only recently stopped bleeding. Actually, scratch that. Compared to me, she looked fine. I was covered in black and blue bruises from head to toe, limping slightly, blood smeared across my chin, and one of my arms was in a world of pain. Talia raised an eyebrow, clearly noticing my sorry state. What happened to you? I shrugged and walked further inside, my eyes scanning the spacious cave for any structural weaknesses I could use to my advantage. Ran into some of your childhood friends, I said, keeping my tone as casual as possible. Willem's grown so tall. Did you see him? For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, anger, maybe, in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Her expression smoothed over, calm and unreadable when she asked, did they do this to you? Ah, most of it, I said with a dismissive wave of my hand. They're strong, especially Alice. She figured out my strategy in under a minute. Her mind's as sharp as her blade. Did you lose? Talia's voice was sharp and direct, cutting through the air like a knife. I frowned at the question, obviously confused. Was she worrying about me? No, that would be absurd. I didn't technically lose. Why? I questioned. She shrugged, her tone indifferent. Just wondering if you've managed to bring even more dishonor to the family name. Ah, there it was. Don't worry about me, I said, letting out a dry laugh that echoed off the cavern walls. Worry about your royal friends instead. I'll pay them back for what they did to me today. I'll pay them back tenfold. Talia blinked, momentarily surprised by my declaration like she hadn't expected that from me. But before she could respond, I gestured toward her with a nod of my chin. Anyway, I began, enough about me. Let's talk about you. How'd you get here so fast? Most of the teams are still fumbling around at the base of the mountain, and here you are, sitting pretty like you've been waiting for me. I left my team the moment we entered the dome, she replied in an easy tone. I asked our scout to come with me. He guided me through the forest, and I managed to get here in less than 20 minutes. She said it like it was nothing, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was impressed. It was more or less the same strategy I had suggested to Michael, sending Lily and Kong ahead while the rest of us stayed back to take down 7 spirit beasts. But that plan would have only worked for us. Because we had Alexia, Michael, and me in the same squad, only we had the luxury to split our forces. Any other team didn't have that same advantage. No other squad could have slayed 7 spirit beasts by dividing their power. That meant only one thing. Talia had given up on the test altogether to get here as quickly as possible. And why did you do it? I asked, my voice low with curiosity. What could she possibly have gained by letting her team fail? What was the point of sacrificing her chances of winning the test just to get here earlier than the rest? So I could meet you here, of course, she said, raising a hand and showing me a faintly glowing crystal between her fingers. The Essence Stone. If I crush this, no one wins, Talia said matter-of-factly. She was right. The cadets had to complete 2 objectives if they wanted to win the test: slay 7 spirit beasts and crush the Essence Stone that was supposed to be hidden in this cave. But if Talia, whose team was likely already out of the test without her help, crushed the Essence Stone, no one would win. However, the very fact that she hadn't done it already meant she had no intention of doing so. Talia placed the Essence Stone on the ground and hovered her foot over it for a moment. But instead of crushing it under her boot, she stepped over it, walking toward me. She stopped a few paces away and flashed me the warmest smile I had ever seen on her face. If you want the Essence Stone, she said, her voice light, you'll have to cross me. 76. Her voice echoed off the cavern walls, sounding more threatening than she probably intended. So, this was her plan. A small smile bloomed across my face. It wasn't surprising. I knew Talia was going to pull something during the test. Honestly, I was waiting for it. In the game, like every other cadet, Talia focused on winning the team test. She even had to fight Michael, along with Alice and Willem, in a 3-way battle. It was an awesome scene in the story, the commoner protagonist courageously standing his ground against a high noble heir and 2 royals. It gave me chills when I played it. During the battle, they all raced for the Essence Stone, and Michael won by crushing it in front of them. By doing that, he cemented his place as the top cadet in their batch. But in this reality, things had veered off course. Instead of striving for victory, Talia practically abandoned her squad, leaving them to fend for themselves while she rushed to get here. She never wanted to win. She just wanted to confront me in this cave, where we would be alone and relatively without any interruptions. I have to say, I'm flattered. You believed in me enough to think I'd make it here. So much so that you threw away your own chances of winning just to face me. Talia's smile turned sharp. Her golden eyes gleamed with something between amusement and challenge. What kind of ace would you be if you couldn't manage even that? Ah, I see. So it was like that. She had said she was going to take my title from me when we met during the party. So this was her way of declaring war. In the game, Talia and Samael barely had any interactions. It was believed that she had given up on her twin brother, dismissing him as a useless disgrace unworthy of her time. But it didn't seem like the case here at all. If anything, in this reality, she seemed to consider me as a threat. I was someone who could challenge her authority. And so, I was someone she needed to actively take out. That was why I didn't destroy the Essence Stone. She wanted to force me into fighting her for it. I let out a measured breath. Can I say just one thing before we begin? Talia tilted her head, her lips curling in disdain. Go ahead. You'll never become the ace, Leah. I said, my voice calm but absolute, as if I was reciting a simple fact. You'll lose. Anyone who tries to challenge me for my title will lose. I may not be the strongest or the smartest in our batch, but I will always have the last laugh. I will always win. Talia didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. Instead, 2 more cards materialized over her shoulder. Simultaneously, a silver sword was woven into existence in her grasp from a rain of shimmering light sparks. In the same breath, even more glowing light particles clustered together and took the shape of a set of heavy golden armor that encased her figure. First came the chainmail, then vambraces, a breastplate, and greaves. Boots and gauntlets clicked into place, and a golden helmet with a white plume crowning its crest completed the look, its visor sliding down to cover her face. A crimson cape attached to her pauldrons billowed behind her, giving her the appearance of a radiant knight. From head to toe, she was a vision of war, a moving fortress encased in shining gold. Let's see if you survive long enough to laugh. She snarled, and in the blink of an eye, she was upon me. Even clad in heavy armor, she was fast. But not fast enough. Her blade sliced toward my midsection, forcing me to step back just in time to avoid it. Before she could react, I raised my leg and drove my foot into her chest, sending her stumbling backward. Not giving her a moment to regain her footing, I rushed forward and kicked her squarely in the chest one more time. The impact pushed her back even further, her boots scraping against the stone floor. Once there was enough distance between us, I pointed my palm in her direction and summoned some of my cards. 2 heartbeats later, a flash of energy shot from my hand, striking her breastplate with the speed of light. Piercing Bolt allows the user to fire a small energy projectile that can pierce through light armor. The force of the blow sent her staggering back another step, and a faint, barely noticeable dent appeared on her golden armor. The momentum was mine now. I had her on the back foot. Throughout this entire test, I hardly drained my essence. Reserves. I didn't use my innate power, even while I was fighting with the Draken twins, and had barely used any of my other cards. Sure, my shoulder was injured, and moving my right arm felt like someone was driving nails into it. Every muscle in my body ached, and the leg I'd used to kick that Bladewraith at the start of this test still throbbed. But thanks to the 2 alchemical pills I took earlier, and thanks to Ivan who smuggled them to me, I guess, my stamina wasn't as drained as it should have been, and the pain was manageable. In contrast, Talia wasn't in the best shape. Earlier when I saw her, I didn't fail to notice some faint cuts and bruises on her body. She must have gotten those from fighting against spirit beasts while making her way here. That also meant she used a good chunk of her essence since she basically had to fight alone. In short, I was in a much better condition than her. Well, fine, maybe not much. Still, I could win this fight. A fiery arrow flared in my grip, blazing with heat, and I hurled it at my twin sister like a missile. But Talia wasn't going to make it easy. She charged at me, dodging to the side with effortless grace, and letting the fiery projectile streaking past her. The arrow struck the cavern wall behind her and exploded with a thunderous roar, shaking the cave and raining loose debris from the ceiling. 77. I threw a few more arrows at her, but she kept running, dodging them somehow, until finally, she closed the distance and swung her sword toward my neck. I called upon Battle Reflex and the card's effect washed over me in an instant. I was out of the path of her blade long before it could reach me. Battle Reflex boosts reaction speed for 5 minutes, aiding in parries, dodges, or counters. Time seemed to slow just enough for me to read her next movement as her blade shifted toward my left shoulder. I sidestepped to narrowly avoid being cut down and fired a piercing bolt at her exposed side. The glowing beam of energy shot forward, but Talia twisted her torso in an unnatural motion, letting the bolt graze past her armor and fizzle out against the cavern wall. So she wasn't just fast. She was reading my every move. No matter. Calling upon Flame Lash next, I conjured a blazing whip of fire that crackled with heat. With a flick of my wrist, it snapped toward her legs. But Talia was quick to react. She stepped back and defended with her sword, letting the fiery whip coil around it. The incinerating heat seared through its blade until it turned a deep red and melted through the middle. The sword dissolved into particles of light, and without missing a single beat, I fired several more rounds of fire arrow at her. As expected, she dodged each one and summoned 3 more cards in turn. A golden kite shield and a lance appeared in her 2 hands as a result. Now, she looked more like a gladiator than a knight. The final card she cast was her origin card, Blessing Bestowal. Our father's innate power allowed him to extract anything from anything. He once even extracted the very essence of time from a region in the spirit realm. In fact, within the borders of the golden sanctuary he had established, no one could die, because he had extracted the concept of death itself from that local area. My sister's power, however, was the exact opposite of his. Where he could extract things, she could bestow power upon objects. It was a formidable origin card. And one day, it would make her immensely powerful. But for now, at C rank, she could only enhance the inherent qualities of whatever object she targeted. For example, a sword is sharp. So she could amplify its sharpness 3-fold. An armor is meant to protect. So she could increase its durability by 3 times as well. But she couldn't make the armor sharp. And the more objects she enhanced, the more essence she would drain. Still, it was a dangerous power. One to look out for. As a matter of fact, her enhanced kite shield became a problem for me almost immediately. With it now fortified, she didn't even bother dodging my fire arrow or piercing bolt. Instead, she barreled through my attacks like a reinforced military tank and kept charging at me. The moment she stepped into striking range, Talia swung her shield aside and thrust her lance straight at me. I bent my knees and raised my guard, bracing for the hit as I activated Steel Hide. Steel Hide temporarily hardens the skin, reducing incoming physical damage for 10 seconds. Her lance came speeding toward me, and I intercepted it with the elbow of my good hand. My skin, now hardened like tempered steel, deflected the blow just enough to keep it from hitting any vital area. And it didn't hurt at all. Or at least, that's what should have happened. In reality, it hurt like hell. It felt like trying to stop a battering ram with nothing but bone and flesh. The pain was sharp and immediate, but I shoved the attack aside anyway, leaving Talia wide open for a counter. She wasn't a fool, though. Before I could exploit her opening, she snapped her shield back in front of her. Unfortunately for her, I had just the move to deal with that, Barrier Breaker. Barrier Breaker massively increases attack power for a single strike, ideal for breaking through shields or barriers. Without hesitating, I drove my fist into her kite shield with all the strength I had, striking from a low angle like an uppercut. The shield didn't break, but the impact was powerful enough to send it jerking upward, leaving her completely exposed one more time. And now she had no way to defend herself. Sure, she was still covered head to toe in armor, but I could practically feel her eyes widen behind her visor. And her shock only grew when I shot a piercing bolt at her face using my other hand. Her helmet absorbed the brunt of it, but the force still snapped her head back. By the time she steadied herself and looked forward, I was already gone, vanished from her sight like I was never there. I had used the moment she was stunned to circle her. Without giving her a chance to react, I wrapped my arms around her waist from behind and lifted her clean off the ground. Wah! A startled cry escaped her lips, but it was too late. I hoisted her into the air and fell backward, slamming her into the ground by executing a perfect German suplex. The impact reverberated through the cave as I released my grip on her. She rolled away, groaning under her breath as her armor clanked and clicked. I did the same, only I was on the verge of crying now. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air was thick with the sound of labored breathing, hers angry and ragged, mine uneven and tired. My arms felt like lead, and my legs weren't faring much better. My body begged me to stay down, to let the pain have its way. I just wanted to sleep now. And maybe eat chicken lollipops. A bucket full of chicken lollipops. And some cake, but I still had some time before I could rest. Talia was tougher than she looked, and she already looked damn tough. A suplex wasn't going to keep her down for long. I forced myself to roll onto my stomach, wincing as my ribs protested. My palms pressed into the rough cave floor, and I pushed myself to my knees. Across from me, I saw her doing the same, her movements sluggish but way more determined than mine. You really don't know when to give up, do you, Leah? I rasped, half a grin tugging at my lips despite the situation. Then, as if on cue, a loud announcement rang throughout the dome. The test is going to end in 10 seconds. The voice began its countdown. 9. Well, looks like it's time to end this, I said, both my palms still pressed against the rocky ground. Gathering the last of my strength, I summoned my final card for this battle, my origin card. 8. Talia grabbed the shield that must have slipped from her grasp at some point, raising it in front of her. Your adventure continues at Empire. Come, she yelled out, and I activated my innate power. 7. Suddenly, the ground beneath us began to shake, or rather, the entire cave started trembling violently. Dust and loose rocks fell from above as the walls groaned under the pressure. And then, nothing. The shaking stopped. The cave grew eerily still again. Talia didn't lower her stance, but I could feel her confusion. Though her visor still covered her face, I was sure she was trying to make sense of what just happened. That confusion only grew when I got up and started running straight for the exit. 6. Hey, where the hell are you? Talia's shout was drowned out by the deafening rumble as the cave suddenly began to collapse. Out of nowhere, the walls split open, jagged cracks racing up the stone as massive chunks of rock tumbled down. The roar of destruction drowned out everything as I stepped through the exit. Yes, this was my not-so-brilliant plan. Every attack I had missed earlier, those fire arrows, piercing bolts, and flame lashes, had been intentional. While keeping Talia's focus locked on me, I aimed my attacks to weaken the cave's structure bit by bit. Once the foundations were unstable enough, all it took was one final push from my origin card to set the entire cave crumbling in on itself. By the time Talia realized what I had done, I was already outside, standing on the ledge overlooking the cave's entrance. Dust and debris billowed out like a storm as I turned back to watch her. 5. Talia remained frozen on her knees for a moment, her gaze darting between the exit and the essence stone lying several feet away. I knew exactly what was going through her head. If she could protect the essence stone and prevent the falling rocks from shattering it, then I wouldn't win. But before she could make her move, a massive chunk of stone crashed down on her shoulder, forcing her to the ground. She cried out, barely managing to raise her shield overhead to block the flood of debris that started raining down on her. 4. And with just 3 seconds left to spare, the inevitable happened. A massive slab of rock broke free from the ceiling and smashed into the essence stone, shattering it like brittle glass. Talia looked up, her shield trembling under the weight of the falling rubble, just as the rest of the cave completely collapsed. The entrance was buried under an avalanche of stone and debris, sealing it shut as I lost sight of her. The countdown stopped, replaced by a triumphant announcement that echoed across the dome. The test is over. Squad 9 has completed the objectives and won. All cadets are hereby ordered to halt fighting immediately. I repeat, Squad 9 has won. Halt fighting immediately. I let out a shaky breath as all strength left my body, leaving me a lifeless puddle of flesh sprawled on the ground. Well, that was easy. No, it wasn't, but with that, I was one step closer to achieving my immediate goal of getting stronger. Now the real fun would begin. 78. It took a few minutes for things to settle down even after the test ended. Amidst the rush of battle and the burning desire to lay waste to their enemies, the cadets didn't stop fighting immediately. Most of them didn't even hear the announcement, too busy bashing the faces of their opponents, or having their faces bashed by them. The staff members who were on standby had to come in and personally stop some of the fights. Finally, 15 minutes later, everything went back to normal. Portals appeared near each cadet one by one, allowing them to step through it and exit the dome. Celine Valkyrin was waiting for us in the academy grounds when we exited the portal. She organized us in neat lines, not caring how tired we all were, and gave us a brief overview of our performance. Yes, unsurprisingly, she had been watching everything that was going on inside the dome. More than half of the total squads failed to finish the first objective, a few of them failed to even slay more than 3 spirit beasts. The academy staff had to jump into the skirmishes between the squads and spirit beasts multiple times to save some cadets. They also had to drag away the cadets who fell unconscious because of the toxins in the dry air to safety more than once. Celine said it was embarrassing, and those cadets would have to attend extra classes under her and instructor Rykart, the PE Devil, as the first years had come to name him, in the future. Fortunately, most squads did slightly better than she had expected, so she was somewhat pleased by their performance. At last, there was my team, Squad 9. Celine said she'd personally reward us with our first mission in a few days, but just because we had one didn't mean we could get complacent. She made it clear that we didn't win because we deserved it or we were better than everyone else, but because everyone else was not competent enough. In her words, we weren't exceptional, just marginally less disappointing. Normally, I would have protested if someone had called me average, but I let it slide since I was in a good mood, and tired out of my mind. Soon, we were dismissed. The cafeteria was mostly empty when I walked in. It was supposed to be our lunch break, but most of the first-year cadets were still stuck in the infirmary building. They were busy buying antitoxins to get rid of the generous amount of ethylorine in their systems. Oh, yeah, they had to buy that. The academy was so fair, right? What a genius way to squeeze even more money out of the cadets. Anyway, since I was the ace, I didn't have to deal with that nonsense. Unlike the others, I didn't need to stand in line for a measly vial of medication. No, I had access to the premium stuff, the kind that was stored in the exclusive medical ward for people who actually mattered. People like me, and the other top-ranking cadets, sure. But it was mostly me who mattered. By the time I made it to the cafeteria, I was already feeling much better. The premium ward had taken excellent care of me, antitoxins, hydration infusions, and even a full-body scan to make sure I didn't have any internal damage. A healer personally treated my wounds and gave me some specially concocted painkillers that were very effective. The perks of being the ace were undeniable. After piling my tray with food, I picked a corner seat and let myself sink lazily into the chair. The exhaustion was finally catching up to me. Nothing hurt anymore, but I still felt drained. Unfortunately, I had a few more classes to get through before I could go home. Wait a second, I'm the ace. I don't need to go to class. That realization hit like a lightning bolt. Yeah, that was right. Another perk of being the ace was that I could skip classes whenever I wanted, unlike the rest of the cadets who were forced to attend every single mandatory course if they didn't want to fail. Ha! I exclaimed, grinning maniacally. I love my life. The cafeteria was suddenly filled with a faint hum of noise. A few cadets were shooting me glares. Perhaps my outburst was more intense than I intended. However, I couldn't help but notice that they were looking at me with more indignation than I deserved for merely shouting a little loudly. Maybe Vince cleverly has already started spreading rumors about me, I thought to myself. I made a mental note to find out what they were later. If people were going to talk, I might as well know what they were saying. For now, I quieted down and turned my attention back to the food. I had just taken a bite of my steaming bowl of stew when my dear friend Jake plopped into the seat across from me, uninvited as always. Hey, Sam, Jake greeted and stretched out a hand toward me. I looked at his outstretched hand over my food. Then at his face. He looked like he'd just walked out of a war zone. His hair was singed, his uniform torn, and his chest was still heaving like he'd run a mile for the first time in his life. And yet, that stupid signature grin was still plastered on his sweaty, pig-like face. My eyes dropped to his tray. It was piled so high with food it was practically a mountain. Honestly, it was a surprise his tray did not collapse under the weight of his gluttony. What do you want, Jake? I asked flatly, ignoring his hand. If you're here for my food, you can choke on your own. His grin widened, if that was even possible. I asked you to grab me an antitoxin vial from the premium ward, remember? Oh, I remembered. I remembered nothing like that ever happening. I slapped his hand away and took another mouthful of stew. I'm sorry, I said with all that guilt in my heart, which was none, and swallowed. I must have forgotten. Jake's smile faltered, and he started whining. What? But I texted you. You never check my texts anymore. That other day, I sent you this hilarious video of some guy eating a raw infant spirit beast egg. It wasn't fully developed, so halfway through chewing, it hatched in his mouth. I glared at him. Jake, I'm eating. Do you mind not telling me something that disgusting? It wasn't disgusting. It was funny, he argued, waving a hand dismissively. There was mucus, goo, and blood everywhere, and this slimy little lizard thing started clawing its way out of his throat. I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. I froze, my spoon suspended at the entrance of my gaping mouth. The vivid, nauseating image formed in my mind without permission. Resisting the urge to retch, I threw my spoon back into the bowl with a resigned sigh. What is wrong with you? I snapped. If what I heard is true, you fell unconscious only 10 minutes after entering the dome. The staff took you out immediately. You don't even need antitoxin because you weren't in there long enough. Jake gasped like his non-existent pride was deeply hurt. You know, Sam, you're way too harsh. You should work on your social skills. No wonder people talk behind your back. I raised an eyebrow. Really? What are they saying? That stupid grin reappeared on his face. Right. In high school, I'd beaten up more than a few guys for trash-talking me. Jake probably thought he'd get to pick fights in my name again. Oh, lots of things. He said cheerfully, like how you extort cadets, paid the academy to make you the ace, cheated during the interview because there's no way you could have passed, you're a lunatic, and, oh, you engage in unusual private hobbies behind closed doors. Jake's grin was punchable, but his words interested me more than enough to give him a pass. Explore more at Empire. I leaned back in my seat, fingers idly drumming against the edge of the table as I digested his list of absurd rumors. Extortion, buying my title, cheating, yeah, most of it was true one way or another. But unusual private hobbies, that one hurt. And while these rumors weren't anything noteworthy now, knowing Vince cleverly, they'd soon be blown out of proportion. Jake's voice cut into my thoughts. So, you want me to sniff around? Find out who's spreading all this garbage and give them a lesson in manners they won't forget. No, I interrupted, more forcefully than I intended. Let it go. I don't care. In fact, I was more than content with the whole situation. Vince truly worked fast. His face fell into a pout that was comically childlike, considering he was still wearing the remnants of what should have been a battle-ready uniform. You don't care. People are dragging your name through the mud, Sam. You're just gonna sit there and take it. You, Samael Theosbane. Yes. His frown deepened into a scowl and his voice tinged with frustration. What happened to you? Why are you acting so subdued these days? This is not the Samael I know. You would have never let anyone talk trash about you back in the day. You were someone everyone feared, and now. Thankfully, before I could shut him up, he stopped speaking on his own. But for some reason, he looked furious. When I followed his gaze and turned to my right, I understood why. Michael was standing there, and he looked awfully pissed when he said to me, "We need to talk." 79. That was inconsiderate. You know what, it's my fault for treating you as a teammate. You'd never have our backs, so I also shouldn't have bothered rushing to help you. That was on me. I was quietly slurping down my stew, which had gone cold. I needed to eat even though I had no appetite because two idiots couldn't seem to leave me alone to even let me have my lunch in peace. Michael was standing to my right, shouting at me things I couldn't care to pay mind to. Things like morals, integrity, team spirit, and all those fancy words. Honestly, I stopped listening even before he opened his mouth. Jake, from across me, was smirking scornfully at the sight of Michael's furious face. From time to time, he was also adding what he presumed to be snarky comments. They weren't snarky, they were lame. Find your next read on Empire. But each time he did that, his smirk grew a bit wider. Finally having enough of these two, I set my spoon down and turned to stare at Michael, who was still busy yelling. And don't even get me started on how selfish your little act was. This is just another way for you to hog all the glory, isn't it? Why am I not even surprised? You're the biggest narcissist I've ever seen. Finding a window when he had to breathe, I chipped in quickly. Okay, what is your problem, dude? Michael blinked, as if my question was not only preposterous but also a bit offending. My problem, he exclaimed, throwing his hands in the air dramatically. It's you. You left Lady Alexia and me to fight back there all alone. You weren't there for us when we needed you. I rolled my eyes, eating a piece of my chocolate pastry. You both didn't need me. In fact, as much as I hate you for ruining my lunch, you alone could have handled the Draken twins. Michael blinked again, this time looking genuinely surprised like he hadn't expected me to acknowledge him in a million years. In fact, the one who took offense this time was Jake, for whatever reason. Ignoring him and stuffing my face with dessert, I continued. Besides, the goal was to win. And for that, we had to finish the objective, which I did. Michael stood there in silence for a few seconds before shaking his head slowly. No, Samael, the goal was to be the best squad. That test was a team-building exercise that was supposed to get us ready for whatever threats we may find ourselves facing in the real world during real missions. I was about to argue, but Michael didn't give me a chance. I could have taken Prince Willem and Princess Alice on my own, sure. But that does not change the fact that you left us. You prioritized winning over your teammates. You sacrifice people like everyone as your pawn. That's what you did against your fight with me. You sacrificed your shadow, Juliana. What's to say you won't do something like that to us again, this time in the middle of a real battle? I was stunned. My mouth opened and closed a few times as I thought of what to say to him. But once again, he had me beat. You know what? I have been thinking about your offer for the past few days. Thank you for making it easy for me. I can't make a deal with someone who I not only distrust but also despise. I stared at him, unsure whether I should feel offended or amused. For someone who prided himself on his heroic morals, Michael sure had a dramatic flair for self-righteous speeches. Despise is a strong word, I said casually, licking the remnants of chocolate off my fork. And here I thought we were bonding. Jake snorted, unable to contain his laughter. Yeah, Michael, you're breaking Samael's heart. Look at him, he's devastated. Michael shot Jake a glare sharp enough to cut through steel. You're no better, always egging him on like some sort of second-rate court jester. This isn't high school anymore. Grow up. Jake leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands behind his head with a smirk that could rival a fox. Second-rate, please, I'm premium entertainment. You just don't have the taste to appreciate it. Enough. Michael turned his attention back to me, his face tightening in frustration. I don't like the thought that someday people's lives are going to depend on a weekend like you. You are a threat. I won't make a deal with someone like you. And with that, he spun around on his heels and stormed out of the cafeteria. Without even having lunch. What an odd fella. Unfortunately for him, he was going to make that deal with me. I was going to have him teach me his essence circulation technique, by hook or by crook. After all, I had the leverage in this situation. I knew Michael inside out, while he had no idea to what lengths I was willing to fall. Oh, so this was your some kind of grand scheme. Jake's overly joyous voice brought my attention back to him. He leaned forward as his smirk turned into a grin, and a mischievous glint appeared in his emerald eyes. I didn't understand why you spoke with him after sending me off the other day, or why you stayed in his squad. But now I see, you wanted to get under his skin. You planned to manipulate him while staying close. Oh, thank the heavens. I thought you'd changed. I was starting to think you'd given up on your revenge. What was this guy rambling about now? I narrowed my eyes, but Jake didn't seem to notice, or care. Instead, he clasped his hands like a cartoon villain plotting world domination and barreled on with his monologue. You pushed all the right buttons, got him fuming, and made him storm off like a drama queen. I bet you're planning to sabotage the squad on the mission. Maybe that's why you went all out to win the test. Oh, this is genius, Sam. But how should we punish him for yelling at you? Should we ambush him outside his dorm, or, oh, what about a prank? Something humiliating, in front of everyone, especially the cheating bitch of a girlfriend of his. I pinched the bridge of my nose, cutting Jake off. Mid-sentence. Jake, stop, just, stop for the sake of monarchs. His grin was wiped off, and he looked genuinely confused. What? I know you don't like pranks, but I can think of something good. That's not the point. I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair. For once in your life, use your brain. We're not taking on Michael. Not now, not ever. Jake looked even more perplexed now, like I was speaking another language. Wait, what? Why? I shot him a pointed look. Do I really need to spell it out for you? He's beaten you, thrice. And frankly, if it came down to a fight, he'd stomp you and me together without breaking a sweat. Again, he's not an enemy I want to make. Jake's face turned a shade darker, his lips twitching in indignation. Low blow, Sam, and might I remind you, you beat him during the evaluation exam. So, technically, I didn't beat him, I snapped, my patience fraying. Julie did. She tackled him into magma while I played the part of a glorified bait. Jake's jaw dropped, his disbelief almost comical. Oh, come on, so now you're just gonna dismiss yourself too? What's next? Admitting that he is stronger than you. He is stronger than me, you fool. I rolled my eyes. And I'm not dismissing anything. I'm just stating a fact. We don't stand a chance against him. Also, I have more important things to do than play petty games. Jake crossed his arms, his smirk returning, albeit weaker. You really have changed, Sam. You used to have a spine. Now look at you, soft. Docile. I snorted, rising from my seat and gathering my tray. If you think not wasting time on pointless grudges makes me soft, then sure, I've changed. I started to walk away, leaving Jake sputtering in frustration. But I couldn't quite bring myself to leave him like that. I knew he was a liability, always had been. Cutting him loose would be the smarter move. His stupidity would get him killed one day, and dragging myself with him was a risk I couldn't afford. Yet, a small part of me still thought of him as a friend. That part wouldn't let me walk away without at least giving him a fair warning. With a heavy sigh, I turned back and fixed him with a serious look. Jake, I'm only saying this once. Don't pick a fight with Michael. If you do, you'll be on your own. I won't stick my neck out for you. He was right about one thing, this isn't high school anymore. Grow up. Jake shot me a glare sharper than I'd ever seen from him. There was no getting through to him. Resigning him to his fate, I left. And unsurprisingly, he didn't listen to me. That night, Jake did something so monumentally stupid that I didn't even have the words for it. 80. Talia was quietly sitting on the sofa. Her room was mostly dark, with the only source of dim light coming from the holographic video projection in front of her. She appeared to be heavily injured. Her right arm was encased in a plaster cast, and a bandage was wrapped around the top of her head. Although her alabaster skin was marred by several black and blue bruises, her tantalizing beauty remained otherwise unaffected. She had been discharged from the infirmary not too long ago after receiving treatment from the medics for nearly a full day. When the staff found her after the team test concluded, she was buried under a pile of rubble. She sustained multiple wounds and had fallen unconscious due to oxygen deprivation. Luckily, she wasn't trapped in that cave for long and was rescued just in time. But her mood was not at all cheerful. There was nothing to be happy about. She was humiliated by the one person she detested the most in the world. In fact, she'd much rather prefer death over this scenario. What will be father's reaction when he hears of this news, was all she could think about. Well, aside from, how did he beat me? Indeed, how did her brother beat her? She had been dueling with Samael since they were both 6. And she had never lost to him. Ever. Well, it was mostly because of Samael's own stupidity. He always believed too much in his own strength, never learned anything from his losses, and was too much of a brat to set aside his pride and analyze his opponent tactically. Whenever they fought, he'd always rely on brute strength to overpower her and try to force her into submission. Obviously, it never worked. Her technique was too flawless. She'd break through his offense with ease by reading him like a book every single time. He was predictable, and that made him weak. But this time, he somehow managed to turn the tables on her. And she couldn't help but notice there was something different about Samael, something unnerving. This time he had fought with calm precision against her. A cold, calculating edge that she had never seen in him before. It was as if everything was under his control since the moment their battle began. Why was he so calm? Talia didn't know, and it angered her. Although she technically didn't lose to him, the end result was that Samael won. Also, she hadn't forgotten how confidently he made a declaration. His voice was still ringing in her ears, echoing inside her mind, and making her blood boil. You'll never become the ace, Leah. You'll lose. Anyone who tries to challenge me for my title will lose. I may not be the strongest or the smartest in our batch, but I will always have the last laugh. I will always win. She'll lose. He'll always win. He said those things right to her face, moments before delivering on his promise and showing how serious he had been. When did he change so much? He never used to have the courage to even look her straight in the eyes. And now he had the guts to challenge her so blatantly. Talia's fist clenched the moment she thought back to it, her injured fingers trembling in a mix of rage and disbelief. But her eyes stayed fixed on the holographic screen before her where the video of the evaluation exam was playing. She was watching the footage to see how exactly her brother won the title of the ace. What did he do? How he bested all the other first years? Talia knew Samael had changed after coming to the academy. No, maybe even before that, since he dueled their father in a rite of valor. She needed to study this new Samael. She had to figure out the current mindset of her brother. How he fought, what he thought, everything. So, that's what she was doing. Analyzing. And while she was in the middle of that, the door swung open and someone strode inside the room where she was sitting. When the lights were turned on, she was able to see who it was. A girl, beautiful beyond words, with long red hair, striking crimson eyes, and an alluring smile on her lips. She was dressed casually in high-waisted shorts and a loose t-shirt. Behind her entered a tall young man, charming like a prince from old fantasy stories, possessing an almost uncanny resemblance to the girl in front of him. He was wearing loose-fit track pants and a shirt, looking as amused as ever like he was in on a joke no one else knew. Although nothing about either of them screamed royal airs, they carried a subtle regal aura that made their status clear without the need for any crowns. They were Princess Alice and Prince Willem. And for some reason, they had invited themselves over to Talia's place. What's worse was that they couldn't take a hint that they were unwelcome here. They just wouldn't leave. Talia feared they were going to crash here tonight, and perhaps a few more nights after that, guessing by the luggage they had brought with them. Alice slouched onto the sofa beside Talia and gave the golden-eyed girl a light nudge with her foot. "What are you watching?" Willem, meanwhile, wandered to the fridge and opened it without so much as asking for permission. "Got any snacks? I'm starving." Talia gritted her teeth, making an admirable effort to ignore them both as her eyes stayed glued to the screen. Alice followed Talia's gaze and frowned slightly upon seeing the video running on the holographic projection. "I always suspected you might have a brother complex, but isn't stalking him a bit much, Leah?" Talia palmed her face, resisting the overwhelming urge to punch Alice. "I'm analyzing his recent fights. He's been acting differently. I need to understand his new approach to combat." Alice's frown deepened. "Shouldn't you have done all this research before you lost to him?" "I didn't lose," Talia snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. Alice blinked, startled by the sudden outburst. Before she could muster a response, Willem chimed in casually, "Technically, you did lose. If it had been a life-or-death fight, you'd be dead." Talia whipped her head around to glare at him, her eyes blazing with unspoken threats. "Oh, if only looks could kill. Okay, my bad." Willem threw his hands up in mock surrender and backed off, retreating to the kitchen counter to make himself a sandwich. Talia muttered something unladylike under her breath and turned back to Alice. The Draken princess didn't look much better herself. She had a swollen black eye and her left shoulder seemed to be lightly injured. Even Willem had a noticeable limp as he walked. "And what happened to you two?" she asked. Alice shrugged. "Willem fought that girl, what's her name? Lady Alexia, Duke Zinx's daughter who keeps running away from home like it's a hobby. I heard her father's practically pulling his hair out over it." Willem groaned as he adjusted his weight on his good leg. "She was a walking disaster. How could someone so little be so ferocious? She pushed me back like I was a child. I swear, I was so close to crying." Alice chuckled. "Meanwhile I was fighting that commoner. His name is Michael, I think. He managed to dislocate my shoulder and get in a good punch. His sword art was also formidable. But it wasn't enough. I brought him to his knees. However, the test ended before we could continue." Talia huffed and shifted her focus back to the screen. For a few moments, complete silence blanketed the room, save for the noise of Willem munching on his poorly made sandwich. Then, the Theosbane heiress whispered something in a subdued tone. "It's the same," both Alice and Willem asked in unison. "What is?" Talia didn't answer immediately. She rubbed her face a few times and sighed before pointing toward the playing video. In it, her brother had just eliminated Alexia, and was moving to fight Michael next. Look, Samael was plotting ahead the entire time he was fighting Alexia von Zinx and that commoner, Michael. He distracted Alexia, lured her into a false sense of security, made her believe she'd already won. And then, he literally shattered the ground beneath her feet. Her golden eyes burned with intensity as she pointed toward the different moment in the footage. "And look at how he takes out Michael. He keeps his enemy's focus entirely on himself, while his shadow tackles the poor idiot straight into lava." She changed the video and put on Samael's duel against the Golden Duke. "See, he does the same thing in this fight too. He distracts our father, closes the gap while hiding his real intentions, and sweeps in to deliver what could have been a brutal blow. It didn't work, of course, because he was hopelessly outmatched. But," Talia's fists tightened again as she leaned back, glaring at the screen like it had wronged her. "This isn't the same impulsive fool I grew up with. He's precise now, calculating." Alice lingered for a few seconds until she couldn't help but ask. "So, what are you saying?" "Misdirection," Talia replied with a single word. Quote. "Huh," Willem asked in confusion, prompting Talia to explain further. Her tone was softer than usual when she spoke again. "When we were kids, our father taught us how to play chess. It wasn't just a game to him, it was war in miniature, a tool to teach us lessons he thought were more important than simple strategy." Alice arched a brow, intrigued despite herself. Willem leaned back against the counter, forgetting his sandwich for a moment. Talia continued, her golden eyes distant, like she was reminiscing about a time long gone. "He told us the board was just an illusion. The real game wasn't between pieces but between minds. He didn't want us to play chess. He wanted us to play the person sitting across from us." She drew in a slow, steady breath, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the armrest of the sofa. "Samael hated it. He never knew what to do. He'd rush his moves, throw everything he had into reckless attacks. I, on the other hand, took to it naturally. I'd outmaneuver him every time, not because I was better at the game, but because I was better at reading him. Her lips twisted into a grimace. Father used to say, a chessboard is a mirror. Your opponent will show you their soul if you know where to look. Their fears, their ambitions, they're all there, hiding behind their moves. Alice frowned, and Sammy never figured it out. Talia shook her head. Not back then. He didn't have the patience, or the self-control. But now, her voice trailed off as she gestured toward the screen. Now it seems he understands. He's playing the person, not the game. Alice thought about it for a moment and commented, you sound almost impressed. Talia's face turned furious. Impressed? I want to snap his head off. How dare he use our father's lessons against me, lessons he didn't even care about when we were little. And he used nearly the same tactic to defeat me that he used to eliminate a blind girl. The sheer audacity. Samael proclaimed that he'd always win, huh? Oh, she would like to see that. There was another stretch of shallow silence. Finally, after a few short minutes, Willem broke the stillness when he was done eating. Wait, Alexia von Zinks, she's blind.